There's only one way to go after that. I'd like to read one or two translations from my recently published book of translations by Italian poet Alfonso Gatto. Alfonso Gatto was one of Italy's foremost 20th century poets. As a young man in Milan during the fascist period in the 1930s and the Nazi occupation in the 1940s, Gatto was arrested for 6 months for his anti-fascist views, and then he was released. Societies have ways, some subtle and not so subtle, of quietly silencing diverse voices and dictating what people should think or what they should say and write. And this is especially true for totalitarian societies. Gatto continued to write poetry that resisted fascist rules. His writing was cryptic and not easily accessible, partly for this reason. But he urged writers to tell the truth and to write what they believed and write in new styles. That's off. He followed his own advice. Alfonso Gatto was a witness to his times. In his poems and other writings, he was an outspoken voice of the resistance and expressed the sorrow and anguish felt by many Italian victims of fascist and Nazi oppression. Some of his poems were published clandestinely, like the one I'm about to read. It's titled "For the Martyrs of Piazzale Loreto." Now, Piazzale Loreto is a large, busy public square in the middle of central Milan. This poem is about several innocent Italian hostages who were executed and displayed in public in a hot sun for days, guarded by an SS troop. No one was allowed to stop and pay respects, not even family members who were allowed to lay a flower down next to their loved ones. In this poem, Gatto expressed the outrage perpetrated on the victims and on the people left behind, who also were victims. In the final stanza, he calls out for divine justice, and he uses apocalyptic imagery. For the martyrs of Piazzale Loreto. And it was dawn. All was still then. The city, the sky, the breath of day. Only the executioners remained alive before the dead. The morning scream was silence. Silence, the wounded sky. A silence of houses, Milans. They remained soiled by the sun even, filthy with light, and hateful of each other, assassins sold to fear. It was dawn, and where people worked, where the square was the illuminated joy of the city, migrating by its own lights, evening to evening, where the same shriek of the trams was the day's greeting to the fresh face of the living, and they wanted a massacre so that Milan would have at her threshold her promised sons all mingled in one heart, and her old heart reawakened, strong and tight as a fist. I had my heart and your heart too, my mother's heart and my children's, those of all the living killed in an instant, for those dead displayed the whole day in the summer's light, in a storm of red-hot clouds. I awaited evil like a swift fire, like water roaring with victory. I heard the thunder of the people awakened from their tombs. I saw the new day at Loreto, where the slain would be the first to rise over the red barricades, still in their work clothes, and with their bare breasts still alive with blood and reasons. And every day, every eternal moment burns at this fire. Every dawn has its breast offended by that lead shot of the innocents struck down at the wall. This book has kind of an odd title. The Wall Did Not Answer. So I thought I would just quickly read this one poem that explains what that might mean. It's called An Evening in March. It was that time in March when, looking at the city's evening sky, At the first flight of swallows, I saw myself alone, but with everyone. Eyes fixed on that transformation happening like frost released by warmth. I remembered in living that I lived, and so taken in becoming aware of my secret rise from the void, I found in my voice the words for reuniting father, mother, cradle, the land that glows in the sun. In Milan's frigid and golden sky on an evening in March, people of my voice and kind were turned eastward to gaze, chorus of poverty that invokes its perpetual name from things. The blue that I saw turned dark foreboding did not answer. The wall did not answer. I think I have maybe time for one change of pace here. This is one of my own, called Diversity Street. I'm sitting in a diner looking out the window at a woman dragging the leash of her little dog with a leg up on a man's pant leg. A young couple park in the car and start necking before getting out. It's beginning to snow, and I have thoughts about being home, sipping tea and by the fire with poems of Leopardi, instead of going off to work at some boring job. Then someone taps me on the shoulder from behind and startles me out of my dream. A young guy leaning over tilts his face into my face and says, "Excuse me, sir, but are you Turkish?" I stare back at him a moment, look around in a who me kind of way. And he says with a funny smile, "Are you Turkish?" A diverse group of faces stares at me from the table across the room, very interested. "No," I say finally, "no, I am not Turkish." He drops a smile, says he is sorry, and recedes behind me. I take a sip and try to get back to my fireplace thought. The lady and her dog are gone, swept away by the people walking briskly down the street. Then a voice behind me says gently, "Excuse me, sir, but are you sure you're not Turkish?" I turn slowly and say, "No, I am not Turkish. But I could be. Actually, I'm Italian, or at least I think I am." It is really snowing hard now, and the inquisitor begins to back away. "No, I'm really not Italian because I was born here, and so are my parents. But I have an Italian name, and I feel Italian. I speak Italian." "Oh," he says, "I'm sorry." My coffee is cold now, snowing white out. I walk toward the glass exit and see the reflection of the checkered group staring at me. I turn and smile, and they keep staring at me with disappointment in their faces as I walk out. And I begin to feel glad that I'm reminded that I'm Italian. I have nothing against Turks, and the others, of course. What works for me is to take them all in as they come down Diversity Street.